Greetings, ghouls and goblins. It's October, and this year I was feeling particularly spooky and bored. In the spirit of the scary season, I've gone ahead and written a few original scary stories coming straight from my brain for you, the listener, to enjoy. You aren't going to find these stories anywhere else, so sit back and enjoy this little treat, you creature. The wind whipped and sent leaves swarming all around us as we slashed away at the densely packed reeds and foliage with arms forged from suitable timber found on the forest floor. The long, skinny poles exploded with water as we struck them down and fashioned a maze of paths through withering, thick flora and scattered trees. I gripped a hilt of my oak blade and prepared for another attack on the villainous vegetation, the knotweed transforming into an army of ghouls and goblins stretching as far as we could see. I hear Brian's triumphant battle cries as he does his part a few feet away in the sea of monsters, many imaginary victims falling to his impressive battle staff. We eventually break through the wall of serried foliage and spill into a clearing at the base of a towering evergreen, its trunk reaching high into the sky, enveloped with inviting branches and fitted with bushels of green needles on their ends. Collapsing at its base, I look up at a canopy above that enshrouds us. The orange sky contrasts with thousands of clustering lines, dancing in the brisk wind, and grows more saturated as the sun begins its daily retreat. "Can't stay out much longer," Brian says, dropping the long stick covered in juices of his enemies. "Yeah, me neither. I don't want to get in trouble again. I told my mom I'd be at the playground," I said, picking myself up from the dirt and pine needles. "Well, good thing we just made a path all the way back, huh?" Brian said, raising his stick that was double his height with a smirk. We turned to the openings in the foliage we had made and plunged back into the weeds, each of us taking our own path, slashing at survivors of our previous assault. I can hear Brian to my left crashing through and stomping fallen weeds, each of us keeping a good time with one another. I started thinking about how much trouble I'd be in if my mom found out I was down here again, and I quickly navigated through my path. I hadn't noticed that Brian got a lot quieter until I could barely hear him at all. I stopped and called out to him, expecting his reply from somewhere ahead of me, but instead I heard a far, muffled voice call out way in the distance. I yelled again, trying to get a better idea where he was, but all I could hear was the wind cutting through the weeds, causing friction in the tree branches above. The orange and crimson sky above began to turn to a mix of swirly purples and blacks, and the sun made its final appearance over the tree line. The canopy above blended in with the night sky, and the stars began to peek through the foliage. I whipped around behind me, expecting to see my carefully culled path, but the army of fictitious vegetation had respawned once again. Turning ahead once more, I called out for Brian until my throat was raw. Tears welled in my eyes, making it even harder to see in the growing shadows. I trampled through and slashed at the densely packed reeds in complete darkness, the only light coming from the small splatters of night sky above. I came crashing out of the brush, falling on the cold, moving floor. My eyes were starting to adjust to the dark now, and I could see that I'd fallen next to a similar tree like Brian and I had found earlier, its trunk sporting similar staircase-like branches spiraling all the way up its base. Grasping on the sap-covered branches, I carefully navigate up the tree in an attempt to see where I was at. My arms trembled as I grew cold, and I was exposed to the wind above, no longer filtered through the weeds. The moon's glow began to bounce off the tops of the sea of never-ending overgrowth. The tree I now clung to became the only one of its kind, as all others seemed to have vanished. I called out to Brian with what little of a voice I had left in between chattering teeth and moans. Over the sound of my panicked heart, I started to hear the rustling of weeds somewhere below. Brian must have heard me. I let out another raspy shout to help guide him, and the sound of crashing weeds crescendos, ending directly under me at the base of the tree. "Brian?" I say through quivering lips, hugging onto the swaying base of the tree a few feet above the foliage. I got no response. "Brian, quit messing around. I'm scared. I want to go home." I feel a jolt go up the trunk of the tree as something grips onto its foundation. The towering hollow trunk starts to sway violently back and forth, and I wrap my body around it. The sticky bark pressed against my wet cheeks as my heart threatened to punch right through my rib cage, and my grip began to loosen. The shaking came to a sudden stop, and I reapplied my grip. Footsteps come from underneath me, slowly circling, crisp leaves turning to dust with every heavy step. There was a brief moment of silence. Anticipation was thick in the air, and I squeezed the trunk so hard I thought I'd cut it in half. Below me, I saw nearby branches shake violently as it began to make its descent. I sprawled farther up the tree, each branch becoming slimmer and more densely packed as I climbed, reaching out for a branch that barely evades my grasp when the tree shakes again, turning my stomach inside out. My hand misses and I grasp at nothing in front of me, my other hand scraping past the arm of the tree, joining me in my free fall. I crash against the spine of a wide branch below and fold over it like fabric, dangling and flapping in a now unforgiving wind. The tops of the weeds brush against my swinging ankles as I kick violently to get supported on the branch. One of my frantic feet is brought to a sudden stop, and a sharp, warm pain rushes up my leg and into my back. Overwhelmingly nauseous, I tighten my grip on the branch, and I feel my sock get warm and soaked as liquid pools on my shoe. The searing pain sets in as nails dig deep into my calf, pulling me downward, attempting to pick me from the tree like a helpless, defiant fruit. The palms of my hands scream out as my arms feel like they're going to separate from their sockets altogether. I feel my grip loosen as I'm plucked down like a pine cone forced from its home in the evergreen. I plummet downwards and crash into the hard bed of pine needles and dirt below with a thud, knocking the wind out of me. The moonlight dances off the needles as the swaying tree above me. The tree crackles and shakes as its unseen occupant descends down to collect the fruits of its labor, which lie broken on the forest floor. Dark silhouettes of towering weeds and shaking limbs dance around, and tears welling in my eyes. With great effort, I turn myself onto my stomach and drag across the cold ground with my one good arm, with my broken body and toe behind, trying to make it back into the weeds. Every grasp at dirt and pine needles seems like a Herculean effort. The ground shakes behind me, announcing its descent from the tree, and I go limp, giving up the effort entirely.